Good afternoon. This is Gigabits and Gigahertz, a blog about telecom, technology, internet, 5G, and all that stuff that we like and love to discuss. And today with me, I have a very special guest that I know for quite a while. It's became, let's say, my friend, Mr. Steve Coran. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Gina. How are you?
I'm doing awesome, and pretty happy to have you here on our vlog experiment, or whatever you might say about this. I'm pretty
I'm up.
excited, and this is pretty surprising to see you so casual on a polo and a hat. You
Well,
you you look pretty tropical.
this is my pandemic work from home look. So once we start going back to the office, I will probably return to my boring normal self.
Awesome. I used to see you in suit and tie and all the events that I never seen you so relaxed, let's say.
Well, looks can be deceiving, but in this case, yeah, I'm feeling pretty relaxed and happy to be joining you, my friend, and spreading the word about spectrum and subsidies and whatever else it is you want to talk about.
That's awesome. Before we start, I would like to for those who don't know who Steve is, can you give us like a quick background on you and what you're doing now?
Well, sure. For the last 13 years, I've served as outside counsel to the Wireless ISP Association, which means I represent WISPA's interests in front of the FCC and with respect to and other agencies as well, and help out on member education, help out on the legislative side, and generally just support the organization in any way that I can as their outside attorney. And I've been in private legal practice for longer than I care to admit, but 30 something years. I got into this thing because I actually got my start in doing radio when I was in high school.
Okay.
And then I realized that I had I wanted to be sort of like a TV guy. And then I realized that
Really?
I had a face for radio and a voice for silent movies. So I decided, well, I go to law school, put off getting a real job for a while. But I like to say I came by it honestly, because I really sort of have always enjoyed the intersection of policy and communication and information. So I've been able to carry that through into a professional career, and now doing what I really love to do, which is to support the underdogs who are providing broadband in a lot of places where the big guys don't. So wake up every day energized by what the members are doing, what folks like you are doing, and it's a real inspiration. Sometimes it's real work, but a lot of times it's a lot of fun because of the great people I get to work with.
It is. So you wanted to be like a radio disc jockey or something like that?
Well, I'm more of like a news guy or a sports guy. Sports is what I really like doing. But I will tell you, the guys who do play-by-play on TV and radio, they make it sound easy, but it's really hard to do. I mean, I tried it once or twice, and I was like, this is really hard work. And I did, radio news when I was in college and during the summers, and I covered murder trials and fires and groundbreakings and press conferences and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed it. But there at the time, working in radio in a non-union shop back in the day was not a very lucrative sort of thing. So when I was in college, I got involved working on a law review article with a professor, and I said, "Oh, this is pretty cool. I'll just be a First Amendment lawyer and try First Amendment cases for the rest of my career." Of course, I didn't do that because I've been more on the regulatory or exclusively on the regulatory and transactional side.
That's pretty interesting. So, wow, I never thought that you were kind of, into, newscasting and all that. So it's never too late. You can have your own blog.
Well, that's true. Maybe we should make this a regular gig. I'd be happy to do it.
So, Steve, let's go into the beef of what we're going to discuss. What's going on right now in the FCC that people that are seeing this now, or maybe in tomorrow, in the next couple of days or weeks, might be interested in terms of the telecom as a whole, or the WISP industry?
Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the spectrum space. That's the thing that I really like doing the most.
I love
And
spectrum.
yeah, I love spectrum too. And people say, well, what is it and what do you do? And, some people say, well, it's like being a real estate lawyer. You're just trying to tell the regulator how they should zone
Yeah.
the property. And, that may
Well,
or may not.
You don't get to see the property.
No, you don't get to see it. And that's what sometimes makes it a little bit elusive. And I'm sort of a visual learner, so I just have to sort of imagine these radio waves going through the sky. But it is kind of like real estate if you think about it. And, there's a lot of fighting that goes on as to how do you zone it? Do you zone it for mobile? Do you zone it for fixed? Do you zone it for high power or low power, for 5G, for some other G? There's a lot of physics that goes into it too, because you can't do everything with every single piece of spectrum that you can.
Right.
Some more conducive to, wide area and good propagation, but, low speeds. I mean, I don't need to tell you about the physics of it. But kind of some really cool things is just about a month ago, the FCC put rules in place that's going to open up 850 megahertz of unlicensed spectrum in the 6 gigahertz band. And that's basically another Wi-Fi band. If you take the 5 gigahertz band, which is getting pretty crowded, and which is used by a lot of WISPs, and just sort of extend that for another 850 megahertz, that's pretty much a game changer. It's one of the more significant things the FCC has done to promote unlicensed spectrum in probably 20 years.
Yeah,
even more so than TV white space. So
I do agree. It's being a huge move by the FCC and a great win for the general public, because you're gonna basically use whatever the FCC has allowed them to use for Wi-Fi for their in-home usage. Right. So that's a big win for the consumer. And for the WISP too, we'll be able to use up to 850 megahertz, depending on the areas and the
right.
incumbents.
And the good thing is that the Wi-Fi guys were really backing this, and they're going to be producing a lot of equipment, whether it's routers or other Wi-Fi enabled devices, and we're going to be able to leverage that for higher power. Because a lot of the equipment's going to have that DNA in it, and to get sort of standard power operation on a shared basis around where the existing point-to-point links are, was a big win. I mean, it was not a sure thing when we started down this road. We actually, WISPA got the FCC to put standard power on the table, and then we worked with allies and our own advocacy and engineering to really move that forward and get the FCC to bite off on it. There's going to be some coordination that's going to be required, something called automated frequency coordination. So, which means that the unlicensed guys are going to need to work around the licensed links. But I'm sure folks like you use the 6 gigahertz links, and that was one of the things we had to sell. Is we're coming at this from both sides. We're trying to protect our existing users, but we're big believers in spectrum sharing, and so that was a huge deal.
I'm going to be frank. The first time I heard about this about a couple of years ago, I thought that it's going to be all for Wi-Fi only, that the outdoor WISP didn't have a slight chance of this happening. And I was pretty surprised.
Yeah. It worked out really well for us. We had some really good allies. A lot of the guys who wanted the indoor power were there to back us as we were there to back them. So folks like, I'm going to miss some of them, but Broadcom and Google and Facebook and HP and a ton of other guys. We worked on this together. We had to push back on the utility industry a little bit because they didn't want any sharing. And then, of course, the mobile guys came in and said, well, why don't we just clear the band? We'll relocate all you guys up to the 7 gigahertz so we can use it for LTE. So this really did hurt. Yeah, I'm serious.
Wow, really?
Into Wi-Fi versus LTE at one point. And
wow.
The Wi-Fi guys and the WISP guys really came out on top. And there's going to be a little bit more work to do. Potentially unlicensed point-to-point links is kind of teed up. So that's pretty exciting. There's also more unlicensed spectrum coming on board at in the 5.9 gigahertz band, up to 45 megahertz. Excuse me. That's going to be strapped on to the 5.8 band. And the beauty of that is the math works out that you can create a 320 megahertz of contiguous spectrum, which breaks down nicely into 160 and 80 and 40 megahertz
Right.
throughput, and that will enable, in some places, real close to gigabit type speeds if you can combine all that spectrum in the right way. And that requires some relocation of some automated or automobile licenses that has not really taken off. And this is also the band, and I know your guest last week talked about this, where more than 100 WISPs have gotten temporary access to that
Yep.
band to help meet the coronavirus pandemic and the shift in bandwidth consumption from schools and businesses to homes during the day. So real proud of what we've been able to do there as well.
Yeah, I always wondered why the FCC didn't allocate the whole 5.9 for WISP, because to be frank, I don't know of any deployment of automobile 5.9 technology. And the ones that might be deployed or existing now could be easily relocated to another band.
So 20 years ago, the FCC said, you're going to use this for something called dedicated short-range communications.
Right.
This is going to be your standard. Well, what they learned is that if the FCC dictates a particular standard and a particular use, there's not going to be a whole lot of innovation. I mean, we just talked about Wi-Fi. FCC didn't dictate standards. The standards body did it. And there's a lot of different kinds of Wi-Fi uses. You don't need to just use it for hotspots. You can use it for a variety of a lot of unlicensed devices and machines and things like that, which allowed it a lot of innovation to happen, which is the exact opposite of what happened. The reason why it won't all be reallocated is because there is some stuff ongoing out there. And second, it's the Department of Transportation is trying to protect the automobile industry that wants to keep their hands on the spectrum. And, the next greatest thing is something called CV2X, which is sort of an LTE-based cellular vehicle to whatever technology. Just take a look at all of the unlicensed technology that is in today's cars, right? Mm-hmm. You have sensors, you have OnStar, all that stuff happened without it happening in a licensed band where standards were dictated. So we're hopefully, 45 megahertz will be a big deal, and then the folks who have the 75 will get shortened into the 30 megahertz, and everybody should be just happy. But Department of Transportation is still, very much involved in the process.
How about, other opportunities in other bands like mid band, like, between the 3 and 4 gig areas? That's kind of now is prime real estate right now.
So, well, we're in the middle of a CBRS quiet period, so I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that, but that auction is going to begin in July 23rd. It'll be very interesting to see who the bidders are, because this is one of the bands where I expect that there will be a lot of different folks, whether it's mobile companies, cable companies, WISPs, IoT companies, neutral host networks. There'll be a lot of folks who really want to, I think, participate in the auction, and we'll know more in a little while when we see how many folks have actually signed up to bid, and then how many folks post their upfront payment, and then we'll go from there.
That's a question I have. Is that information is going to be publicly available before?
So some of the information will be available, such as who the bidders are and who posted upfront payments, but you won't know how much they put up.
Right. Just the list of the participants.
Yeah, and you won't know who you're bidding against, but the bidding will move in a way, and you may get a sense as to how they're bidding as to who they are.
Interesting. That's going to be very interesting.
It definitely will. And then later this year we have the C-band auction, and that's going to be, I think that's going to be a much more expensive proposition. Maybe not on a megahertz per pop basis, but you have 20 megahertz licenses instead of 10. You have 15-year license terms, and you have big one. You have PEAs, which are partial economic areas. There's more than 400 of those, versus CBRS, which is at the county level, and there's 3,200 of those. So I think the math is going to be very different. It'll be interesting to see if folks lose out on CBRS if they go to play in C-band. I do think folks are looking at the two a little bit differently. Maybe CBRS more for capacity and overbuilding, at least among the mobile guys, overbuilding in some of the cities. But I think they're really looking at C-band as something on a much larger scale, given all the spectrum that's available.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the big guys in mobile will skew towards C-band more than CBRS.
Right.
Interesting enough, today I read on the industry news that one of the FCC commissioners just made a statement about the possibility of CBRS getting more power in the future. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, folks have been asking about that, and for a while, and the FCC has not been willing to go there. And if you think about it, there are some big counties, but there's a lot of small ones where having more power could just sort of create more interference issues for you.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a double-edged sword. I'm not sure that higher power is necessarily a game changer. I think we should try to live with what we get in the auction, and there's a lot of GAA going on. In fact, I read that there were twice as many GAA registrations in April than there were in March.
Yep.
So GAA is way beyond the experimental stage, and a lot of folks are deploying in that tier, and some will just be happy to stick with that, and some will say, well, that's a start, and now let's go out and acquire some of these licenses. So really excited. I know the equipment manufacturers have been certifying more and more CPE. I saw an announcement today about another one. So really pleased that the ecosystem is making a big change here. And for the first time, a lot of the WISPs are going to be deploying, standard-based equipment. I mean, we haven't seen what we've had heretofore has been mostly proprietary or WiMAX or Wi-Fi based stuff, but it hasn't been LTE. And this is it's LTE is a big deal, not just because of its capabilities, but it's also sort of a great exit path. I mean, if you want to sell out to a bigger carrier, it's having standards based and having LTE makes you a more attractive target.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. And I have read about other spectrum in that kind of range, like 3.1 to 3.3 or something like that. Is that a possibility in the future?
So there is spectrum between 3.1 and 3.55 that's being used by the military, but there have been some reports saying they can clear out 100 megahertz and share others. So the FCC's begun that process, and I think they're going to continue to do that. The first thing was dealing with that's an amateur radio band, and so the first thing the FCC wanted to do was find a new home for the amateur guys, and then at the same time work with NTIA on what we do with the federal users, whether we share with them or move them to another part of the band where it's more efficient, or whether they're cleared out altogether. Clearing the band is, kind of means it's available for auction. And, excuse me, available for auction, which is not always, the best spectrum policy option. So I'd like to see or think that there'd be some kind of a mix between licensed and unlicensed with whatever comes out of that. And then probably next year, we're going to have some 2.5 spectrum available for, what we refer to as white space areas where there is no licenses assigned on that particular channel. A lot of that is in the Midwest, west of the Mississippi, but there's little corners here and there that you'll be able to pick up, and that'll be a pretty interesting auction that I think will probably happen in 2021.
Cool, interesting. And on the industry right now, how do you think that the pandemic and the quarantine has affected the industry in terms of first of how the FCC deals with all their issues? Have they slowed down their pace, and obviously how that affects the industry as a whole?
Well, I'm going to say something that people may find kind of rare, but the FCC has done a great job in working with the public, and by that I mean WISPs and mobile companies and broadcasters and Native American tribes on getting them additional tools to deal with pandemic, and they've been doing this while they've been working remotely. So it's really kind of awesome to see how people are able to adapt and collaborate in ways that they haven't before. And a lot of the creative thinking that's been going on among companies and lawyers, and the way the FCC has, in the 5.9 band, made more spectrum available. Dish isn't using their spectrum, so they said, AT&T, why don't you use this?
Right.
Tribal lands, if you want access to 2.5 spectrum, as long as you have the equipment, go ahead and do it. And I think the other thing is that, I haven't heard of any networks actually falling down over the additional use. I mean, some were able, experienced. What I heard is on, and I don't know what your experience has been, but about a 35% uptick in the amount of traffic from the end of February into March and April, as more folks worked and learned from home. So, but the networks were able to handle that, and I think that says a lot for the innovation and the entrepreneurship and the engineering expertise that we have in our country, both across all sectors. That we were able to sustain network connectivity and also come up with creative ways to make it better.
Yes, I agree. We saw like a 30 to 35% increase as the phone ringing somewhere here. I don't know. Okay, sorry about that. So you guys, we're not professionals, so. So yeah, we saw a 35% increase, about average 33, 35. So yeah, that's on point.
Yep.
So I kind of agree. The FCC have provided a great service to the whole nation, basically, and all their operators by speeding stuff up and just moving as fast as they can. So kudos for them.
Yep.
And the other big topic is the RDOF. And I just recently read that finally the FCC allowed for fixed wireless to be used for 1 gig connectivity, or have they not? Or they're about
close. We're close to that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So the FCC has proposed to do that in a draft order.
Okay.
The final order is going to get voted on Tuesday. So my fingers are crossed that the FCC doesn't go back to where they were before and limit it or I should say prevent fixed wireless technology being used for gigabit, or only make it available to those that have previously done it and reported it on their Form 477. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be a high bar, and you, if you're applying for it, are going to have to pull from a lot of different sources in order to be qualified to bid at that level. If you're bidding fixed wireless or even a hybrid technology, it's not going to be enough to stick on a spec sheet and saying, here's what I'm doing. You have to have demonstrated a lot of due diligence. Right. One of the things we're going to run into, however, is that this deadline is coming up faster than I think we thought. It's July 15th is the deadline for filing your short form. So between now and then,
for RDOF?
For RDOF. So even though the auction doesn't start until October 29th, your short form is going to be due on July 15th. And that's caused a couple of problems. One is the auction procedures aren't going to be done until Tuesday. We're not going to know the final list of census blocks until, shortly after Tuesday. And a lot of folks who had deals in the works are trying to figure out a way to get them done, because once July 15th comes, you can't do any major changes, which is, selling your company or selling a majority portion of it, or, even continuing discussions with folks who are also going to be bidders. So it's going to have a chilling effect on transactions in the marketplace. And I think folks would have liked to have a little bit more lead time before they had to, so they could wrap up their discussions or what have you before they had to go into the quiet period.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. I would think that, now with the 6 gigahertz band and so much spectrum, 1 gig could be not easily achieved, but less problematic, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And the good thing is the FCC said that we recognize that 6 gigahertz and the 37.6 gigahertz bands are both available spectrum options for you, but you're still going to need to be able to say, How can I demonstrate that I'm going to use this spectrum or have access to it for 10 years? And in the past, the FCC has understood that unlicensed spectrum doesn't create guarantees, but they've understood if you've been using it for 10 years in the past, there's some expectation that you will going forward. So I think there may be two people who have exactly the same background, but if they don't say the right things to the FCC is going to look at them differently. So really need to be rigorous in the way you present your technical plan and demonstrate your ability to meet whatever speed tier you're going after.
So you mentioned 37.6. Is that unlicensed?
Yes, I believe it is. I mean, there's a licensed part and an unlicensed part. And
I read about that about 1 or 2 years ago, but it wasn't clear. Maybe you can clear it up for us.
I wish I could, but there's some stuff that's still hanging out there. So I think it's maybe the upper 37 or the lower 30. Some of it is still in play. There's like 600 megahertz that the FCC has not quite worked out yet, but they've had a couple of millimeter wave auctions. I think you've played around with some of the 60 gigahertz unlicensed stuff, and so there's a lot of really good success stories coming out there, and just encourage the manufacturers to continue to upgrade their gear. I've heard some things about what some of the companies are planning to do, later this year to launch new products. The 802.11ay chip, is that the one that is just becoming commercialized even as we speak?
Yeah, the new one for 60 gig.
Yeah. So that's cool stuff too.
It is.
And I'm pretty excited about that. And that's going to be a big deal. The RDOF auction. It's potentially 20 billion with a B dollars that, well, not in this first stage, but overall that is going to be available. Not all of it will go, because there will be some areas that won't get any funding. But I think it's going to be a really, really great opportunity for folks to either upgrade their own networks or to expand into new ones.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm gonna do more research on that 37.6, man. You piqued my interest there.
Okay, good.
Cool. Steve, it's been great to have you here in chat. Any last words? You were almost.
I would just say everybody stay safe and stay vigilant. And what is it that what is the guy's name? I can't remember. What is it? Champagne Dreams and Caviar Wishes or something like that? What was it? Lifetime of the Rich and Famous or something like that?
Yes. So, wow. I forgot his name, but yeah.
Robin something or another. But
yeah, I was a small kid by then, so
I was a little older. But yeah, wish everybody well, and stay safe and soldier on.
Awesome. Steve, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. It's been a great experience to have you here. Great information, very valuable to our, the WISP industry and the telecom as a whole. So we appreciate it. And for me, to all you guys, keep safe and keep connecting America. Thank you very much, and we'll be here next time. See you. Bye-bye.